Welcome to Unificationism and the Environment. And we will also be speaking this week about sustainable development and related themes. This reminds me that at University of Bridgeport, we had a graduate program very similar to the Peace Studies program of HGI. It was called Global Development and Peace, GLDP. So bringing the two topics together. So let's look at this more closely. First, I will, as a reminder, have a look with you at something we've already seen, the notion of holistic peace. That means peace that embraces everything. It sounds almost mystical, but actually it's very simple and very practical. Uh, Peace within, inside, inside of my heart, my mind, peace. Peace between myself and my neighbor, and peace among meaning among all the other stuff that's out there, all the other things, including especially the environment, nature, all the different social structures as well. You can take it, organize conceptually a little bit this way or that way, but essentially inside, among people, and with the environment. And this was proposed by a scholar, a peace scholar called Torren Hansen, an American peace scholar. I have no idea where he found that. It's in Genesis, and it's also common sense. If you go to a place like Manhattan, which I go to sometimes, you can see almost immediately that when you look at people's face, a majority of people anyway, that there's little inner peace, certainly little inner harmony, and certainly not much joyful energy generated inside through that harmonious give and take within themselves, within people themselves. And sometimes this explodes into situation where we really struggle, terribly, and things can happen to the point, that our internal condition doesn't allow us to continue to live even. Relational peace, you look how people interact, usually not very harmonious, just make it work, you don't want to trouble, but not very harmonious. And then occasionally, and sometimes more than occasionally, it degenerates into all out, close combat between people, and then war among nations. And then the environment, if you look at Manhattan, and I'm sure you can look at your own towns and even villages, especially a place like a large city like New York City, even the richer areas, even the places where people live well, they are not really made for human beings. It's just a desert of concrete. It goes very high up, but it's concrete, and also lots of bad smell, lots of trash sometimes, even in the better places. It's not a place made for human beings to live happily, enjoying the beautiful environment that God has given us. So these three are the challenges, the challenges against self-harm. That's inner peace. I mean, the opposite of inner peace, relational harm, when we don't relate well with each other, and environmental harm. So that brings this concept of the environment in contact, or more than just in contact. It shows that it is part of the notion of peace. Normally, you think the environment is not exactly something related to peace, but here you can see, yes, it is. And it's a very important element if we want to have a peaceful world. We have to care for the environment. Otherwise, there will be little happiness, little development, and certainly little peace. So how does that work relate to unificationism? generally, and here I've taken almost at random a poster, one of many similar posters of one of in this case, World Christian Leadership Conference events that stresses the end of conflict and of war and conflict, but also at the bottom, empowering harmony, unity, and peace for a unified world. So it is absolutely part of our vision to have a holistic approach to peace, harmonize not just everything together, but everything together and harmonized. Whatever the content of this particular webinar was. That's the basic idea that you find in all our uh, projects. Now, here you have a quote that is from Dr. Michael Mickler, HTI professor, who wrote this little book about the Unification Church movement, uh, published by Cambridge University Press, so a very respectable, if you will, publication. And in the few pages that I had already asked you to read, he states that the rallies of hope, some of the bigger events that we've had, especially in Korea, and associated organizations and, excuse me, events, I believe, were long on symbolism and bore an unmistakable tilt to the right. That means basically the participants in our big events, our summit councils, the names changed a lot, but we had many such already a long time ago, and especially in the early 20s, just before COVID, if you remember, and then again after. The VIPs so that we have invited and who came to these events, mostly conservatives, mostly people, as it says here, on the right. This was somewhat balanced by centrist leaders such as Ban Ki-moon, former Secretary General of the UN, who was actually also rather conservative in Korea. He was not on the Liberal part of the Liberal Party, but nevertheless a centrist person with a concern for the environment. And representatives from the developing world, of course. We have had many representatives from Africa, Asia. So that compensated a little bit because these representatives were often more from the left. In addition, Mrs. Moon emphasized environmental degradation, so that's our topic today, ethnic and race relations related, poverty and inequality or inequality related, and she questioned the American gun culture, the Second Amendment that is sacred and holy to most Americans. There was perhaps an unwieldy amount of ideological diversity. So many people from so many different perspectives, with so many different perspectives, politically and in every way, that's difficult to, it's like almost cumbersome. How can you bring these all together and follow one goal? So that is for, explains the unwieldy amount of diversity in the coalition she fashioned. Nevertheless, she carved out a serviceable public persona as the mother of peace. So somehow all this coming together of just about everybody in the world worked because there was a strong central direction coming from a strongly committed person who knew what she and still knows what she wanted. This is in the past because it's about past events. It went somewhere. It had the capacity to go somewhere. It's not chaotic. Now, looking at the detail or the specifics of all these many different trends and tendencies and positions, looking specifically at positions on specific issues, we come to the following conclusion, and that's based on what I just read from Dr. Meckler, a little bit expanded. So what are the points that bring us into at least close contact or make us easy allies with conservative people, in particular conservative or right-wing political leaders? Well, the first one, support for traditional family values. That means a father, a mother, and children, and morality, and all the things we stand for, the family values, true family values, as the privileged foundation for heavenly family values and leading to the blessing. While the left uh, has an agenda that is mostly also about LGBT values, if you will. So on that point, we are very clearly with the conservatives, not necessarily what they do, but at least what they preach and what they hopefully usually believe. The second one is religious liberty. Again, the Democratic Party or Liberal Party in the United States strongly supports the liberty of minorities, including LGBT and many all kinds of minorities, not so much religious freedom. There also some very strongly, but it's not the center. Their effort is not primarily on religious liberty, while on the other hand, the conservatives um, or the right strongly supports religious liberty, especially under the current administration, so-called evangelicals, conservative Protestant Christians strongly emphasize that, and much less all other, diversity and minorities, not so much. Just trends, but quite clear. As trends, they are quite clear. So on this point, of course, we strongly emphasize religious liberty as the central liberty that the United States Constitution guarantees, for instance. Third, what is often called American exceptionalism, which means America is special, which leads the United States, for instance, not to be part of certain international organizations because, such as the international court system, because America doesn't want to be under something that's not American. So it doesn't sound very nice, does it? However, the idea comes from earlier times where the sense was God has prepared America for a special mission. That's, of course, reflected in our unificationist understanding of the United States, America's, it could be many countries, but the United States being the elder son nation. That means the Christian nation, the nation that has a strong Christian foundation, especially compared to Europe. It's really migrated from Europe to the United States and North America. And it's a country that has been blessed, that has people that came from all over the world and religious faith in God, and has been blessed to become very strong and powerful so that it can help the rest of the world come together. Of course, in World War I, and especially even more so in World War II, and in the Korean War and others, it was the country that prevented evil regimes from dominating the world. So that's the understanding of America, the traditional understanding and self-understanding of America. Uh, and we, again, emphasize that. I don't need to explain it to you. So these three things bring us into apparent, I would say, apparent oneness or relative oneness with the conservative side. No questions about that. Now let's look at those elements in unificationism that bring us into, again, closer contact with, or to some degree oneness with, the liberal progressive elements of society. And maybe some of you feel, oh, really? Is there such a thing? Are we progressives? Well, there are some elements. Actually, number-wise, there are more. But the first one is environmentalism, the concern for the environment, global warming, pollution, depletion of resources, all that. Now, you hear the left, for instance, under President Joe Biden, that was besides the LGBTQ agenda, that was the other one that was very strongly emphasized continuously. Not so much today, right? We, I mean, our true parents, and I will show you quotes, our true parents strongly emphasize the concern for the environment. So on this point, clearly, that doesn't mean we are liberal progressives in the political sense that we have in the United States, which almost means Marxian, close to no. But the concern is clearly the same as that of the liberal progressives. We are not necessarily the same as the people who share our concerns, but we have a shared concern. Second, the call for comprehensive gun control. If you hear what our true mother has said about gun control, even the most leftist, the most extreme leftist in the United States will not even dream of saying what she said. She said the state should take all the guns. Only the state should have the guns. And if people need guns to go hunting, the only good thing you can do with a gun, unless you don't like hunting or your animals, poor animal, you don't want to kill animals, but generally it's one thing that's not destructive of other people. If you want to go hunting, you can borrow your gun from the government. So currently, the left is trying to get gun control. That means not everybody can have any type of gun, as in some states. Basically, you can just go and buy a bazooka. Nobody's going to stop you. That's what the fight is. Mrs. Dr. Haq Jahan goes way beyond that and says people should just not have any guns. She said it's crazy. People just having gun at home, it's crazy. So that clearly is a position that is very close to the label progressives. Second or third, severe criticism of colonialism and racism. I think I don't need to explain that. Trevor Moon has spoken out many times. We are an international, an interracial, inter-everything family. The marriage blessing between, so no question about that. That's again something that many people uh, are against, even on the right and on the left. But it is more specifically like the accusation of the West having against the West's colonial past. That is more strongly something that the left has been emphasizing. And same thing about racism. Even though you can say that the Civil War in the United States was led by a Republican, at that time they were. So it's not that simple, but generally uh, it's the left that is most interested in this, and in a rather virulent way. Then next, I think it's fourth, calls for voluntary redistribution of wealth, equalization. That's a very well-known motive. Technology transfer, adoption of the UN lingo. We do not reject the concepts and even the terminology of the United Nations, like sustainable development, because it's part of reality. It's something that we have to face. So that, again, is not something that you have very much with the current government, for instance. And finally, generally speaking, a rejection of military solutions across the globe. And you have quotes in Trupan speeches about the Iraq War. It's in connection to the um, international highway and the bridge between Russia and Alaska. father actually started, I mean, was the first to say that that would the 200 or what $250 million that the Iraq War cost at that time. It went much further, not to speak about what's happening today. That war, that money would have been more than enough to create a bridge between the United States and Russia, or at that time it was still the Soviet Union. And we are committing horrible sins against the future generations by spending so much money killing each other. Now, it's not always simple, I know, and in some cases, uh, World War II, Korean War, it's necessary. But according to Reverend Moon at that time, the Iraq War and the war in Afghanistan, for instance, were very unfortunate things. They may have had good intentions, there may have been a righteous reason to do something against somebody who was a tyrant, but it was not the proper way to do it, and the result was not good. And I'm not going to go into what's happening today in the world. I think we have to wait some time, wait out to see what's happening. But definitely, it won't be a favorite solution if there's another option. So, so you see, we are close to both sides. In other words, we have the same concerns as both sides. You are not necessarily like the two sides, but you have similar concerns, much more than you would think at first. Now, a very major event, Dr. Haq Jahan, True Mother, spoke in 2016, exactly 10 years ago, at the Kennedy Caucus Room. It's a very prestigious hall, meeting room. I mean, it's large. Uh, in the Capitol in the United States, in Washington, D.C. She gave a public speech. And in her memoir, Mother of Peace, she says the following about that meeting. Many people expressed to me their gratitude for having introduced a new path toward peace. Republican, conservative, right wing, just to make it clear, US Senator and Senate President pro tem or pro tempore, Orrin Hatch, who assisted with and attended the inauguration, is a longtime friend. He was one of the most important political leaders in the Republican Party, very long time senator. He was the most important voice against True Father being imprisoned. He stood up for him, and Father said at that time he was the only righteous politician in the US Congress. So he is very much conservative. He was a Mormon. He passed away since. But on the other side, you have Senator Edward Markey, representing the Democratic Party. He is a liberal Democrat from the very, very democratic and liberal state of Massachusetts. He expressed his gratitude for our contributions toward environmental preservation and promised to support us. So True Mother herself brings these two together to show the concern is there on both sides. We are concerned with we share the concerns of both sides, try to bring them together, and especially we try to bring both sides together. We have always tried to invite people from both sides. The fact that we are much more conservative politicians who come to our events is because they are the ones who come, because they consider that what we have in common is more important than the Democrats consider. He is an exception because he really feels that for the environment, we do the right thing and he wants to support it. Now, he's not the only one. So this is something that some of you may know and others maybe not. We have had former presidents, Gerald Ford, George Bush, the father, and of course, Donald Trump, and I probably miss one, who have come to our events physically or through the internet. We never had a Democrat. So many may think we all just try to surround ourselves with conservative politicians. Not so. Uh, Actually, about 4 or 5 years ago, at that time, that was in the early 2000s, back when he was still a rank and file member of the Democratic Party, he was actually a state senator of Illinois, so he was not just a member. The newly, now at that time, newly elected President Obama attended the annual True F, that's probably True Parents Value, a True Family Value Awards banquet in Chicago. And his wife, Michelle, attended the ACLC prayer breakfast meeting about 2 years ago. And here you see Dr. Keon Kim holding a picture of, you can hardly see it, but this is Barack Obama attending this event, banquet, under the banner True Parents. And I heard he took the holy wine. So he's the only US president to receive the blessing, at least that first portion. And when this picture was presented to Father, he signed it. So we reach out. Now, when Barack Obama became president, because of his overall, um, how should I say, his overall perspective or his overall um, policies, he found himself often at odds with the Washington Times. In other words, the Washington Times often criticized him, and the Times was removed from the front row where it was under the conservative presidents that preceded him. So we then always keep that, keep that warm relationship with him, but it's not that we didn't try. Of course, we have to tell the truth if we feel that it has to be told, but we kept trying to invite him. And still today, as far as I know, we try always. It's not coming from us. And then here, a detail, President Obama's aunt, she graduated from HTI. At that time, it was UTS. So that is just to show what is actually happening. Doesn't change anything to who we are and what we believe, but the outreach is there. And at least to some degree, there has been a response. Now, going back to the notion of, one, two, three, Doran Hansen mentioned, peace within, peace between, and peace among. And that's, of course, the three blessings. The first blessing, individual perfection, the second, family perfection, and the third, perfection of dominion. That's the environment. So obviously, if achieving the completion of the three blessings, as we have seen repeatedly, is necessary to have peace, because you cannot have peace. If you are not satisfied, you cannot have lasting peace. If your heart is not filled with love, you cannot achieve the fulfillment, the purpose of creation, you cannot be at peace. Well, there are three steps. So that shows again that the concern for the environment is absolutely necessary. It's part of working for peace. You have that, and here you will have the next step already announced with one word. A quote from Mother in Mother of Peace. According to God's word, our responsibility is to have dominion of love, not dominion of power, over all things, and to share our prosperity. Here you have the word prosperity. Why? Because peace with the environment, connecting with the environment, means we have to love the environment that is given to us, that we need to, first of all, to live healthily and happily, to enjoy. And that includes prosperity. It includes using the riches of nature given to us by God to their fullest extent, and use our creativity to increase it, to go beyond that. Here you see already a slight difference to most of the environmental concerns and activism on the left, which do not hint at the need to achieve prosperity so much, but rather cutting down development. So that here you see already a slight difference. Yeah. About Africa. The African peoples are tremendously good-natured. They love their families, respect their neighbors, and live in harmony with nature. Nonetheless, as it is everywhere in the world, Western modernization has brought Africa mixed blessings. Its prosperity, which is a good thing, comes at the cost of destroying family and tribal traditions. Now, these tribal traditions are, of course, not always good. There's always, I compare that to a beautiful face, there's always pimples. And like female genital mutilation is not a tradition, a tribal tradition that needs to be maintained, certainly not developed. But essentially, there's a whole culture of civilization that is a good, positive, and that is rediscovered actually even in the West now. Ubuntu is like a catchphrase now, a word that's very common everywhere, even if it's certainly largely misunderstood. But in any case, that's what Humada says. I believe that Heavenly Parents' love will strengthen indigenous African values that support interdependence and mutual prosperity. So that's much for the culture and for the way the West has destroyed it, and it has also destroyed the environment, at the same time as it has brought prosperity, at least to themselves and a little bit to Africa, by modernization and by technology, engineering, all these things that the West has developed so much and brought to other continents. Next, true peace certainly requires that we resolve the current conflicts between religions, races, and nations. But the even greater challenges that we face are or include the destruction of the environment and demographic trends. That's another part of the among. In Korea, notably, there'll soon be nobody left. It doesn't matter who is president, there's no population left because the population decreases at the extreme. People don't want to have children. So, and that's a general problem, even in China. But let's focus on the destruction of the environment. So here it says it's even more important than religious problems, racial problems, and war between the nations. Now here you have a peace-loving global citizen. That's the autobiography of our true father, Reverend Moon. The three greatest challenges of modern society are solving pollution, uh, problems, creating a consciousness for protecting the environment, and increasing food production, all related. If any one of these is neglected, humanity will become extinct. So usually the most important problems that True Parents presented in the past have been communism and also uh, immorality, moral degradation in the family. And of course, it remains. But here you see this is even more important because you cannot even discuss about having a good family or a bad family if you don't exist. And if humanity becomes extinct, there's nothing left at all. You cannot even have nuclear war because nobody to push the button. I mean, I don't mean to be cynical, but it's literally the most dangerous thing. And that's what is expressed here. I let you read the rest. Endless greed for material possessions. That sounds very leftist, right? Potentially, anyway. Now, let us see how that fits, actually. I already suggested that there is some difference between uh, our position or unificationism and the liberal or left-wing insistence on the threat of global warming and pollution of the environment, all these things, and the dangers of selfish development that Truffaut just mentioned. And at least academics and peace activists know that word. I don't think in the large public it's very much known, but there is something called the degrowth movement. Degrowth as opposed to growth. That means destroying growth. I mean, going the opposite way. Growth goes up, so degrowth. It's from the French. French leftists coined that term. Décroissance. In French, it's a word. You know, croissance means growth, and degrowth means negative growth. But in English, they created this new word. It's a little bit, it's horrible, but and it means essentially, to simplify, that development, talking about economic development, not child development, is fundamentally destructive. To develop something, you need to destroy something. That's Gilbert Rist, who was from Geneva, a professor at university there, a famous third world activist and environmentalist. His point is, whenever you build something, to build a house, you have to destroy trees. So you cannot develop anything without destroying first. Therefore, development is fundamentally destructive and a bad thing. So if it sounds extreme, it's probably because it is. But in any way, it's said with very seriously. And there are many in that kind of people who participate in that kind of a trend. Um, there are many people who support that perspective. And they're, of course, always on the left. And they are against economic development, etc., etc. I think the best known example is at that time, when she first became famous, teenager Greta Thunberg from Sweden, who uh, refused to fly, went on a raft to South America to participate in a big conference in, I forgot which South American country. I think it was Argentina. In any case, she went for several weeks on a big raft with lots of people helping her, because you can't do that alone. And when she arrived, she realized that, well, there had been some social unrest and it had been cancelled. And it was changed, the location was changed to, I think, in the UK, in London. So then she had to go, I don't know how she went to London. And of course, many people laugh at that, because one one place, one seat on an airplane to go to Argentina, of course it pollutes, but it probably doesn't pollute quite as much as having 10 people on the raft for 3 weeks who then have to go back all the way to the other side of the world. So um, that's one kind of one typical case of somebody who has this kind of mindset. And therefore, the solution is you have to stop growing. You have to do less. Uh, and then Amartya Sen, whom we have also studied, he is much less extreme. Actually, his point of view is quite compatible with unificationism, is that development is good, but we should not just have more, higher, 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 higher. And so if it's just, to be able to have statistic that the GDP of this country is very high, we are very rich, we should consider what happens with that money. How much do people become free to do what makes them happy? And not just some people, but all people. That makes that's much more reasonable, right? But it goes a little bit into the same direction, a concern, not just for development, but for what makes us happy. And even if there is some sacrifice needed. Now, here is from the World Economic Forum, which is a business and political forum in Switzerland, very famous. It's a world forum. Donald Trump attended last time and insulted everybody else, including the Swiss president. Um, they explain degrowth. It's a radical economic theory born in 1970s, okay? It broadly means shrinking rather than growing economies to use less of the world's dwindling resources and, of course, to pollute the less. So, environmentalism is a concern we share. Detractors of degrowth say economic growth has given the world everything from cancer treatments to indoor plumbing. In other words, well, it's not all bad. You want to give up everything, you want to again live like we used to live in the Stone Age. Then supporters will argue that degrowth doesn't mean living in caves with candles. It just means living a bit more simply. Now, if you read academic papers written on that topic, this is actually not quite true. Of course, nobody will say live with candles in caves because you won't have many disciples. But many academic papers written on the question of how can we avoid running out of resources and polluting ourselves to death. The only way is to do things that are much more dramatic than any plan that the UN has or anything that's being done today, even things that are not being done, the things that people advocate for but are not quite being done. Well, even if they were done, it would still not be enough by far. So what is being advocated by many goes much further, like extreme restrictions in our way of life. I leave it as it is. Now, why do people on the right usually not swallow that? Well, I think, at least from the well, as far as the degrowth movement is concerned, it's easy to understand because it's extreme and not many people are willing to solve the problems by saying that development is just fundamentally something we don't want. Doesn't sound quite right, etc. But why does the right usually, people on the right, conservatives, not care so much for the environment? That has always been a mystery to me. At least it caused me to think, because after all, we all have that environment. And why would conservatives care for religious freedom, care for the family? Why do they not care for the environment? Why do this? I don't care, it's polluted, that's fine. Global warming, that's fine. We can, the ice caps can all melt and we can all be flooded. Never mind. There are many reasons. Of course, conservatives are usually very connected with business development. That's a fact. There's also very left-oriented business people in the United States, but there's a strong tendency for people on the right to be quite focused on development, economic development. And the left is perceived as going after the throat of economic development. So you push it back. And one of the best examples before Greta Thunberg was Al Gore, former vice president who nearly made it to become president. He was always speaking of climate change, and he got the Nobel Prize for peace for that. But conservative publications like the Weekly Standard present him like this, as somebody ridiculous, exposed because he made many claims. He said, I invented the internet, which he obviously didn't, but he also made use of many very faulty studies on climate. And so he is presented basically as a fake, whereas most other people almost divinized him. That was, 10, 15, 20 years ago. It was fast. I remember the favorite teacher of our daughter was like that. Al Gore was the savior of humankind. This perspective is perceived by conservatives many times as fake. It's humbug. It's just they do that to destroy our Western civilization. And our current president, God bless him, is very much along those lines, very much along those lines. So I think there's a quite, how should I say, a negative give and take between the two sides on that. Now, you may totally disagree with my analysis, and it's just mine. But we tend to use the weaknesses of the other side to excuse our own. So for those who basically don't have much interest in making sacrifices to protect the environment, the fact that those who insist very much on it have lots of weaknesses, are often in bad faith, or even if they're in good faith, they are ridiculously uh, out of touch with reality. That is a very good way or a very good escape to say, you see, these people, these environmentalists, they are ridiculous, they are evil, they are leftists, they want to destroy the United States. So, maybe true, but so we don't need to care about the environment. That's just, even though probably, to be honest, uh, there's something to it, right? Uh, and the left, on the other hand, vilifies anything that has to do with development, especially when they sit comfortably at home in the richest city on earth, Geneva, for talking about Gilbertists. So fallen nature against fallen nature, I would say. But it is something really quite surprising. Shouldn't be, in my opinion. Now, what do we do as unificationism? Well, first of all, I would say the first thing that comes on the front line. WANGO, in case you wonder, is the World Association of NGOs or of non-governmental organizations. That is an NGO that was created a long time ago, and I believe it's not really active anymore, with a central person in that, I forgot his position, but anyway, was mostly running it for a while, was Dr. Rick Swartz, who teaches some classes currently at NHGI. This was the focus of this NGO, or World Association of NGOs, was on the environment and specifically on the Pantanal. But even more than that, our founders, and here you have Reverend Moon, but his wife, Dr. Haq Jahan, was with him all the time, went into the jungle. And I heard so much. I've been to Jajim in Brazil, which was not the jungle, but close to it. They were driving in places where they could be hit by branches, bitten by snakes. Anyway, really dangerous places and incredibly hot, bitten by mosquito, going to a place with no toilet, really the extreme discomfort in order to pioneer the restoration of the environment. And with many, many projects, we'll look at them. So not just I gave money for a project, do something there. I go. And True Father was there sweating like crazy. Even where I was sweating like crazy. And there's a video that I will post. Then what I know, and that some of us, I'm sure, know, in the 1990s, all blessed families were invited to go to spend a 40-day workshop in Jajim, Mato Grosso do Sul, which was bordering the Pantanal, or part of the I don't think quite the Pantanal, in Brazil. And yeah, I spent 40 days there sweating. And when you went to the bathroom, you suddenly saw a small crocodile in your toilet, toilet bowl, and things like that. So, but it was a wonderful natural environment. And you see Reverend Moon here playing with parrots and so, and he was sweating. I had many meetings with, he was sweating like crazy, but he felt comfortable. I was sweating like crazy and I felt incredibly uncomfortable, almost dysfunctional, even though I liked some aspects of it, but this heat and the humidity, unbearable. One with mind and body harmony, you can see it in action. So, and then you can see that buildings were built. There was a whole development. For a long time, it was silent. There were all kinds of issues with the government. Now it's again active. Even further on the frontier, Leda, or Puerto Leda, I think, in Paraguay, uh, isolated place can only be reached by boat or maybe by small airplanes, if I know well. Basically pioneered by Japanese elders, including really old ones, Japanese elders to whom I am a junior. I'm 77, so they're physically and in every way older than me, and many of them quite sick. And some of them have spent years and years. One who was my wife worked with him in Japan. He is still currently there. He's an old man. His hair is completely white. And of course, much younger people as well in our second gen. I mean, all kinds of people going there. But the first ones who really pioneered were all Japanese elders. It was the jungle. There was nothing. They built everything. If you know, I don't need to explain. If you don't know, you'll have at least a little idea. You see the huts there. Now they have better um, better buildings. And the president, I think his name was Franco of Paraguay, visited at that time in the early days. And they take care also of the local population, Native American populations that lived in misery and quasi total isolation. So, and regularly they fundraisers. Every year I give some money to help them. So that's another frontline investment for the environment and of course for peace in the world, because that's part of it, including the people who live in the environment. Now, if you go all the way north from extremely hot, it's the tropics. Depending, I mean, I've been there, no shadow, high noon. You just literally have no shadow. You go then to Kodiak, Alaska. That's pretty cold. And then I couldn't find a picture, but also fishing in the Antarctic, that's even colder, for krill to solve the problem of food. And I've eaten little fish cakes made of krill or fish powder that were prepared to be able to be shipped to countries in the world where people starve. Then the problem is always we need our social and economic environment to participate. We cannot do it all ourselves. So conceptually, it's been there as a test, but it has not been fully implemented because of uh, logistics. But anyway, that's constantly concern for the environment and for food. And again, our two parents have been there personally a lot, and I've been spend their time with them. It's tough, practically no sleep, and then fishing. Most people get seasick. I was lucky; I never got seasick. Up, down, up, down. I was eating my lunch, no problem, but I could never catch a single fish for 2 weeks. The second time I went, I caught one right away, and then I was good. But so it's tough. It's very tough. It's really frontier. And anybody who has been with Reverend Moon and Dr. Hakchahan, two parents, knows they are real just from that, just from that. And of course, we still have now all kinds of occasions given, especially to young people, to spend time in the summer fishing in Alaska and going through basically general training of character as well. Now, going back to the conceptual aspect from a peace-loving global citizen, it is human selfishness that is destroying nature. Human competition for the shortest route to economic success is the reason that the Earth's environment has been damaged. We cannot allow the Earth to be damaged any further. Religious people must lead the way in the effort to save nature. So you have here the slight difference, slight but essential difference to the degrowth movement. It's not economic success or even the route to economic success. It's competition for the shortest route that creates damage. In other words, the route for economic success without any consideration for the consequences. And I'm not don't want to repeat myself, but it's actually not so difficult to have industry that doesn't pollute. And I think I've already mentioned that a study in Japan, after the war, Japan was destroyed, so they very quickly re-industrialized to become what they are today. But in the beginning, they just thought industry, no concern for the environment. That became a catastrophe. Then finally, the state intervened, the courts intervened and forced the industry to care for the environment. And then I had the numbers, um, what it cost to create filters essentially, or something that prevented what they created industrially from polluting the environment. That cost a small fraction, really not much, compared to fixing the incredible damage that had already been done. So selfishness is self-defeating. And if you don't do it that way, and that's why you need religious people who presumably and hopefully care for mind-body unity, family unity, harmony, and just caring for others and automatically caring for the environment. If you love people, you're not going to torture your dog, right? And if you love your dog, you are not going to senselessly destroy trees or plants. It's natural. When I was 3, 4 years old, I don't remember, but very, very vaguely, but my mom told me I went to a park regularly in front of our home, and there were some beautiful large trees. And one time, for some reason, which of course I had no idea why, they cut one of these big trees. So I was there, sitting there with my mom, not far away, not right next to it, and I could see and especially hear this chainsaw cutting this tree. And she said I went absolutely hysterical. And the only thing I can still feel as a child, instinctively, you hate the destruction of something that's alive. And that noise and that killing that tree. So it's every human being naturally is like that. So no human being in his or her right mind would want to achieve economic development at the uh, at the cost of uh, environment or by hurting other people. Nature is God's creation and his gift to humankind. We must work quickly to awaken people to the preciousness of nature and the urgent need to restore it to the rich and free state it enjoyed at the time of creation. Sometimes Reverend Nunes said the Pantanal that we have talked about, that's creation as it was originally, before the flood judgment of Noah, which probably is meant symbolically. Now, sustainable development. Remember, it was in the title. So sustainable development means development you can continue. Development that will not continue until you have to stop because you do it in the wrong way. That pollutes so much that everything collapses. Sustainable means that. Development, yes, good, but in such a way that you can continue and making things better and better, not you develop until you hit a wall and you have to stop, or you develop until at least half of humankind is more and more miserable while you are feeling better. This is the Sunhak Peaks Prize. I don't think I need to explain to you what it is. Look at the people who got it. Well, even those political leaders who got it, Hun Sen, not always considered the model of democracy. He's still in charge through his son in Cambodia. And Ban Ki-moon, Secretary General of the UN. If you look at the beginning, that's just the beginning of the explanation of why they received their prize. For Hun Sen, it's founders, leader of sustainable development in Southeast Asia. Ban Ki-moon, a leader striving for a sustainable Earth. And still now that he is retired from the UN, he has his own organization where he strongly works for sustainable development. And you have here some of the events or organizations that are highlighted. including the famous Sustainable Development Goals, all 17 of them. And then you go to actually another political leader, Anotetong, who at that time when he got our prize was the sitting leader of Kiribati. And since then has continued to work for the environment. I don't know if he's still alive, by the way. I forgot to check. But if he's still alive, he's a very old man. And his country, Kiribati, is a Pacific island, and it's just a matter of time until it no longer exists because it'll be completely submerged. So he is on the front line, and he does everything he can against global warming and pollution. He received the Peace Prize. And then you have these three. I say that with lots of respect. Sakina Yakubi, educator in Afghanistan. I've met her. She's a wonderful person. Gino Strada, he was a surgeon, an Italian surgeon. When he died, the Italian newspaper, their front page was just filled with only him. So very famous in Italy. Basically, he did everything for others and the global south, and wherever he could, he helped. He didn't try to make any money. So he was a humanitarian medical doctor. And Dr. Gupta, he was a pioneer of a fisheries scientist, pioneer of fishing cultures. In other words, there are not enough fish in the sea, even in the sea, to nourish all humankind. So you have fish farming, something that Truffaut himself has strongly advocated for. So these three people are examples, again, of how much concern unificationism has for the environment. But I think I have also shown you that it's not just that we are concerned for the environment, therefore on that one we are leftists. We have a similar concern. Conservative people tend to be really concerned for religion, our soul, family, traditional family values. And then liberals say, hey, wait, what about the environment? You have also to take care of that. And we say, yes, we hear you. But you could say to take care of the environment properly without excesses or without being in your own way, maybe somewhat destructive of the third blessing, which is essentially development, healthy development that then embraces the environment instead of destroying it. For that, you need to have the first and the second blessing as well. In other words, you have to emphasize these two elements. And that, in that sense, our concern for the environment is somewhat different from the one that many people on the left have, even though it allows us to work together, absolutely. As this gentleman from Massachusetts said, we have a similar concern and we can do many things together. So that was the purpose of my presentation. There's, of course, a lot more I could say, but I hope that this has been of some interest. Thank you for your attention.